on a cool autumn evening. Henry Bennett arrived at an upscale city known for hosting one of the most luxurious hotels he had meticulously built. A sophisticated man in his late 50s, Henry had successfully established a chain of high-end hotels from scratch. However, today he visited the hotel not as its owner but as a regular guest, aiming to evaluate its services unannounced. Henry dressed casually in comfortable attire, jeans, a light jacket, and a striking red MAGA hat. The hat reflected his political beliefs, but for Henry, it was merely a part of who he was, not something meant to provoke others. As he entered the hotel lobby, Henry took in the hustle and bustle of activity. The grand lobby was adorned with luxurious chandeliers and polished marble floors, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and unique. Watching the steady stream of guests arriving and departing, along with staff attentively assisting them, Henry couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the empire he had built with his own hands. He decided to keep his identity a secret, allowing him to observe the staff in their natural state, unaware that the man before them was their employer. For Henry, the most important aspect of business was sincerity and dedication to customers, and he wanted to ensure these values were upheld across all his hotels. Henry approached the front desk, where Julia Taylor, a young receptionist in her late 20s, was on duty. Julia was attractive and confident, though at times her confidence bordered on arrogance. As Henry stepped forward, Julia glanced up, her eyes immediately drawn to the red hat he was wearing. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to a thinly veiled contempt. Julia held strong prejudices against the political connotations associated with the hat, and she made no effort to hide her disapproval. Henry smiled politely and said, "Good evening. I have a reservation under the name Bennett." Julia frowned slightly at the mention of his name, her gaze flickering back to the hat. She let out a faint, dismissive laugh and pressed her lips into a thin line before responding, her tone tinged with coldness. "I'm sorry, sir, but we reserve the right to deny service to anyone displaying divisive symbols." Henry raised an eyebrow, surprised. He hadn't expected such treatment, especially not at his own hotel. Maintaining a calm tone, he replied, "I don't understand. I'm simply here to check in, with no intention of discussing politics." Julia crossed her arms, her tone growing firmer. "I'm afraid I cannot proceed with your check-in. You will need to leave the premises." Henry took a deep breath, working to keep his composure. He had faced many challenges in his life, but he had never been refused service at an establishment he owned. Resolving to address the situation calmly, he requested to speak with the manager. Julia hesitated briefly before finally picking up the phone to call the duty manager. Moments later, Carl Dawson, the shift manager, arrived. Carl, a man in his early 40s, had been with the company for several years. He was known for his laid-back demeanor, sometimes to the point of being overly lenient, and he often avoided confrontations with staff. "What's going on?" Carl asked, his gaze shifting between Julia and Henry. Julia quickly responded, her tone slightly defensive. "This man is wearing a MAGA hat, and I've informed him that we cannot proceed with his check-in. Our policy doesn't allow symbols that might make others uncomfortable." Carl glanced at Henry, his eyes briefly settling on the red hat before he shrugged indifferently, showing little concern. "I'm afraid she's right, sir. We have a responsibility to maintain a comfortable environment for all our guests, and that hat could be considered offensive." Henry felt a wave of disappointment but kept his expression neutral. He realized neither Julia nor Carl intended to handle this situation fairly. "You're really refusing to serve me over a hat?" Henry asked, his tone calm but tinged with disbelief. Carl nodded, his face showing no hint of compromise. "We have to think about the comfort of all our guests. If you don't comply, we'll have to ask you to leave." Henry looked at both of them for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You might want to reconsider that decision," he said. his tone even and devoid of anger but carrying an authority that neither Julia nor Carl seemed to notice. Julia scoffed, clearly unconcerned. "Security will escort you out if you don't leave on your own," she said, her voice laced with impatience. Henry didn't argue. He simply turned and began walking toward the door, his posture relaxed, his expression composed. As he reached the exit, he glanced back at Julia and Carl, offering a faint, enigmatic smile. "I assure you, this isn't over." Two security guards approached, and Henry allowed them to escort him out of the building without resistance. He didn't feel anger, only disappointment. Disappointment in his own employees, whom he trusted to uphold the values of his business, yet who had chosen to treat him and likely other customers this way. After leaving the hotel, Henry walked to his car. Instead of driving away immediately, he sat in the driver's seat, deep in thought. He had spent his life building this hotel chain, envisioning it as a place where everyone would feel welcome, regardless of religion, politics, or anything else. Today, he had seen a different side of his business, and it made him realize that action was needed. Henry pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name Sarah Matthews, the regional director overseeing his hotel chain, including this particular property. Sarah had been with Henry since the early days of his business expansion. She was someone he trusted implicitly, not just for her exceptional management skills but also because she understood and respected the values he wanted his hotels to embody. Sarah answered the call after 2 rings, her voice warm yet professional. "Henry, what a surprise to hear from you at this hour. Is there something I can do for you?" Henry sighed softly, his tone steady but filled with resolve. "Sarah, we have a serious problem at the downtown hotel. I was just denied service and escorted out of the building, all because I was wearing a hat." There was a brief pause on the line before Sarah responded, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You're serious? Who did this?" Henry replied, "The receptionist and the shift manager. They made it very clear that my hat wasn't welcome and refused to check me in. I need you to handle this first thing in the morning. I'll be in the office, and we need to have a serious discussion about how this could happen." Sarah's voice now carried both disbelief and concern. "Of course, Henry, I'm so sorry this happened. I'll take care of it immediately and make sure we find out exactly what went wrong." After hanging up, Henry sat in his car for a while longer, looking toward the hotel. He knew that the next day would be a challenging one for Julia and Carl, but it was necessary to uphold the values he had worked so hard to build. Starting the engine, Henry drove away, fully determined that this wouldn't just end with a simple meeting. The next morning, the sky was clear, with soft sunlight streaming through the office windows of the hotel. Sarah Matthews arrived earlier than usual. She had spent the previous night thinking about what Henry had told her. She couldn't accept that her staff had treated Henry, the founder and owner of the hotel chain, with such disrespect. Moreover, it was a complete violation of the core values she and Henry had worked so hard to build over the years. The moment she entered the office, Sarah wasted no time. She called Julia and Carl into the meeting room to get a clearer understanding of the incident. Both employees arrived with surprised expressions, seemingly unconcerned. Carl appeared confident as he entered, offering a polite, casual smile, while Julia seemed mildly irritated, as though her time was being wasted unnecessarily. Sarah gestured for them to sit. Her face was cold, her voice sharp and authoritative. "Do you know why I called you here this morning?" Julia glanced at Carl before shaking her head. "No, I don't. Is there an issue with the front desk?" she asked, her tone laced with impatience. Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze growing sharper, filled with disappointment and anger. "Oh, there is an issue. The issue is that last night, the two of you decided to deny service to a guest with a valid reservation simply because he was wearing a hat you didn't like." Julia's confidence faltered, her expression turning tense. She crossed her arms tightly across her chest, a defensive gesture. "That hat was a MAGA hat," she said defensively. It's divisive, and we have the right to refuse service to anyone who makes other guests uncomfortable. Sarah couldn't contain her anger. Her eyes narrowed like daggers as she stared directly at Julia. "Do you have any idea who the man you refused service to last night was?" she asked, her tone icy and threatening. Carl, who had maintained a casual demeanor throughout the meeting, now began to sense the gravity of the situation. He sat up straighter, his expression shifting from indifferent to worried. "No, we didn't know who he was," Carl said slowly, leaning forward slightly. Sarah's voice dropped to a chilling calm. "That man was Henry Bennett, the owner of this hotel and the man who signs your paychecks every month." Both Julia and Carl were stunned. Julia's face went pale, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came out. Carl's eyes widened in disbelief, unable to hide his shock and growing fear. The room was silent for a moment before Sarah continued, her tone devoid of any warmth. "Mr. Bennett is furious, and I don't blame him. You treated him with utter disrespect over a hat. This isn't about politics. It's about professionalism and respect for our guests, no matter who they are." Julia attempted to defend herself. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to make other guests uncomfortable." Sarah shook her head, her expression filled with disappointment. "You were wrong. This is a luxury hotel, and our job is to provide exceptional service to every guest who walks through our doors, without judging them based on their appearance or beliefs. You've made a serious mistake, and now you will face the consequences of your actions." After the meeting, Sarah escorted Julia and Carl to Henry's office at the hotel. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with both Julia and Carl appearing anxious and unsure of what was to come. Henry sat behind his desk, his expression calm yet stern. As Julia and Carl entered, he looked up, his sharp eyes locking onto them. "Good morning," Henry began, his tone steady but commanding. "I assume you both now know who I am." Julia swallowed hard and nodded, her voice weak. "Yes, sir. We're very sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Henry raised a hand to silence her. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his tone growing sharper. "This isn't about politics, and it's not about a hat. It's about respect. Every guest who walks into this hotel deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter who they are or what they believe. You made an assumption about me based on a single item, and that's not only unprofessional but completely unacceptable." Carl lowered his head, his face red with embarrassment. "I understand, Mr. Bennett," he said quietly, his voice filled with remorse. "We should have handled the situation differently. I take full responsibility for my actions." Henry's gaze shifted between the two of them, his expression unwavering. "You need to understand that this hotel, and every hotel in my chain, represents professionalism and respect. I built this business from the ground up with the goal of creating an environment where everyone is treated with courtesy and compassion." Julia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes as her voice cracked. "I understand, sir. I'm truly sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone." Henry took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair. "I appreciate your apologies, but I need you both to understand that actions have consequences. What happened last night cannot happen again, to anyone." After the meeting with Henry concluded, Sarah escorted Julia and Carl out of his office and brought them back to the conference room. The atmosphere in the room was heavier than ever. She knew it was time to make serious decisions to uphold the hotel's values. Taking a deep breath, Sarah began, "I want to make one thing clear. What happened last night was absolutely unacceptable on every level. This company prides itself on its commitment to treating every guest with respect, regardless of their beliefs or background. Your actions have seriously violated that principle and put the reputation of this hotel at risk." Turning to Julia, Sarah's gaze was unwavering and firm. "Julia, your actions were entirely out of line. You allowed your personal biases to influence your duties as a receptionist. Your job is to provide excellent customer service. not to judge guests based on their appearance or beliefs. Effective immediately, you are terminated. Julia's head shot up, her eyes wide with shock. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. Finally, she simply nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. Sarah then turned to Carl, who had remained silent, his face pale. Carl, as the shift manager, it was your responsibility to handle the situation professionally. Instead, you supported Julia's actions without considering the broader consequences. You failed in your role. Carl swallowed hard, his voice shaky. I understand, Ms. Matthews. I made a mistake, and I deeply regret it. Sarah nodded slightly. I acknowledge your regret, Carl. Given your long history with the company, I'm giving you a choice. You can either resign or face a formal investigation, which may lead to your termination. Carl bowed his head, his shoulders slumping. He knew that an investigation would only prolong the ordeal and likely end in dismissal. I will resign, he said, his voice quiet and broken. Very well, Sarah replied. I need your official resignation letter by the end of the day. After Julia and Carl left the conference room, Sarah remained seated alone, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. The decisions she had made weren't easy, but she knew they were necessary. The company needed to uphold the core values Henry had worked so hard to establish, and there could be no compromises when it came to treating customers with respect. Sarah understood that this wasn't just a case of individual mistakes. It was a symptom of a deeper cultural issue within the hotel's work environment. She resolved to immediately implement new training programs for all staff, from management to reception and service teams. The next morning, Sarah convened a meeting with the hotel's department heads. Everyone had already heard about the incident and appeared anxious about what was to come. Standing at the front of the room, Sarah's expression was firm, her voice steady and resolute. As you all know, a serious incident occurred at our hotel last night. A guest was denied service because of an employee's personal bias. This is completely unacceptable and goes against every value we've built this company upon. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Starting today, we will roll out new training programs for all employees, focusing on professionalism, objectivity, and delivering exceptional customer service. Every staff member, from management to service teams, will be required to participate. Sarah continued, we cannot allow personal biases to dictate how we treat our guests. This is a wake-up call for all of us, and we must take this lesson seriously. The department heads nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. They understood that the reputation of the hotel, and indeed the entire chain, was at stake, and that any further missteps could lead to dire consequences. Sarah concluded the meeting with a clear and emphatic statement. I want everyone to understand that this is not optional. This is mandatory. We must all commit to change, and that commitment starts today. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the hotel underwent a noticeable transformation. Sarah swiftly implemented training and retraining programs for the staff, focusing on professionalism, objectivity, and exceptional customer service. She knew that a repeat of such an incident could not be allowed if the hotel chain's reputation and the values Henry had built were to be preserved. At each training session, Sarah emphasized that the staff's role was not just about providing a service, but about taking pride in welcoming and caring for all guests with fairness and kindness. She encouraged the team to share stories and situations they had encountered while working with guests, including the most challenging ones. These discussions allowed employees to learn from one another's mistakes and improve their skills collectively. One of the most memorable training sessions occurred on the 5th day of the program. Sarah asked all employees to sit in a circle and share an experience where their personal biases had influenced how they treated someone, whether at work or in their personal lives. At first, there was hesitation, but Sarah, with her gentle and patient demeanor, broke the ice by sharing a personal story. She recounted a time when her own bias had clouded her judgment of a new acquaintance. Her story eased the tension in the room, and one by one, The employees began to open up and share their experiences. One receptionist, Linda, spoke about an instance where she had encountered a guest with a disheveled appearance and had unconsciously assumed they couldn't afford to stay at the hotel. Linda later discovered that the guest was a renowned artist returning from a long trip, and she felt deeply embarrassed by her snap judgment. These shared stories prompted everyone to reflect more deeply on how they treated others and the unintended consequences of unconscious biases. From this session, Sarah realized that the change needed to go beyond policies. It required a shift in mindset and the hearts of each individual employee. In the weeks that followed, the hotel's work culture began to shift noticeably and powerfully. Every employee, from the front desk to housekeeping, became more mindful of their attitudes and interactions with guests. They placed greater emphasis on creating a memorable experience for every guest. Regardless of who they were or where they came from, Henry decided to return to the hotel to observe the changes Sarah had implemented. This time, he left his MAGA hat at home and dressed casually, just as he had on his previous visit. He wanted to experience the genuine transformation of his staff, not because they knew who he was, but because they had changed their mindset and spirit. As he walked into the hotel lobby, Henry immediately sensed the difference. A warm and friendly atmosphere filled the space. A new receptionist named Ben greeted him with a welcoming smile and a gentle, professional tone. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to our hotel. Do you have a reservation?" Ben asked enthusiastically. Henry smiled, nodded, and handed over his booking information. Ben quickly located his reservation and checked him in efficiently and accurately. There was no hint of judgment or assumption, only professionalism and dedication. Handing Henry his room key, Ben said, "If there's anything you need during your stay, please don't hesitate to let us know. We're here to assist you." Henry could feel the sincerity in Ben's words, and he knew that the changes Sarah had implemented were making a difference. He glanced around the lobby and noticed other staff members working with smiles on their faces. The interactions between employees and guests were cheerful and pleasant, a far cry from the atmosphere during his previous visit. Henry felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that the hotel was becoming the kind of place he had always envisioned, welcoming, respectful, and professional for everyone. After his visit, Henry felt a sense of relief, but he knew the story wasn't entirely over. A few days later, Sarah forwarded him an email from Julia, the receptionist who had refused him service previously. In the email, Julia wrote a heartfelt apology, expressing deep regret and a desire to learn from her mistake. Sitting in his office, Henry read through Julia's letter carefully. In it, she admitted that she had allowed her personal biases to affect her professionalism and expressed remorse for the harm she had caused. She also acknowledged her failure to uphold the company's values and hoped Henry could forgive her. "Dear Mr. Bennett, I want to extend my sincerest apologies to you. I allowed my personal prejudices to interfere with my professionalism, and I deeply regret how I treated you. I understand that my actions were not only wrong but also potentially hurtful. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me and allow me to learn from this experience. I am truly sorry for what happened." Sarah had forwarded the email to Henry with a brief note. "Henry, I think you should read this." As Henry read the letter, he could sense the genuine sincerity in Julia's words. He knew she had reflected deeply on her actions and was eager to make amends. After a moment of thought, Henry decided to reply to her. "Julia, thank you for sending your apology. I appreciate your courage in acknowledging your mistake and taking responsibility for your actions. We all make errors at times. What truly matters is what we learn from them. I hope this experience helps you grow into a better version of yourself. Wishing you the best in your future endeavors." With that, Henry felt a sense of closure, knowing that Julia had taken a valuable lesson from the situation. It wasn't just Julia who felt the need to confront what had happened. Carl also recognized the importance of owning up to his actions. Unlike Julia, Carl wanted to apologize to Henry face-to-face. He reached out to Sarah and asked her to arrange a meeting with Henry. On the day of the meeting, Carl stood outside Henry's office, filled with nervousness and determination. He knew he had made mistakes and didn't want to avoid taking responsibility. When Henry invited him in, Carl entered the room with a slightly bowed posture, his face clearly showing regret. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for agreeing to see me," Carl began, his voice trembling but sincere. "I know my actions were unacceptable, and I wanted to apologize to you in person. I failed in my responsibilities as a manager, and I let my team fall short. I deeply regret what happened." Henry listened intently, his expression thoughtful rather than stern. When Carl finished speaking, Henry nodded, his voice calm yet firm. "Thank you for coming to see me, Carl. I appreciate the courage it takes to admit a mistake, especially one as serious as this. What's important now is what you've learned from this experience and how you'll use it to grow." Carl nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I promise you, Mr. Bennett, I will do everything I can to become a better leader. I've learned a lot from this mistake, and I hope to use it to make positive changes moving forward." Henry extended his hand, and Carl shook it, a gesture of forgiveness and a chance for a new beginning. "I respect that, Carl. We all stumble at times, but what matters is how we rise again. I hope you'll take this experience as a lesson and become the leader I know you can be." After Carl left the room, Henry sat back, feeling as though a burden had been lifted. The recent incident had not only been a challenge for the hotel, but also a valuable reminder of the importance of treating everyone with respect and kindness, regardless of who they are or what they believe. Henry knew that sometimes the most painful mistakes could be the most valuable lessons, and he felt proud to see his team, people he trusted, working hard to correct their errors and grow into better versions of themselves. The training programs Sarah implemented didn't stop at theoretical lessons or group discussions. She decided that hands-on practical training was essential, allowing employees to directly apply what they had learned in real-world scenarios. Her goal was not only to change how employees thought, but also to transform how they worked. In one of the practical training sessions, Sarah invited several special guests to participate as simulated customers to test how the staff interacted with and treated their guests. Each employee was assigned different tasks, from greeting guests to handling special requests and resolving challenging situations with the utmost professionalism. Ben, the receptionist who had warmly welcomed Henry during his recent visit, was tasked with greeting a mock guest. The guest, one of the trainers Sarah had invited, arrived with a somewhat disheveled appearance and requested a room without a prior reservation. Ben smiled and calmly guided the guest through the on-the-spot booking process, explaining the hotel's services in a warm and pleasant tone. He didn't let the guest's appearance influence his level of service. After the session, Sarah praised Ben in front of the entire team, emphasizing that professionalism wasn't just about skills but also about treating everyone equally and with respect. Linda, another receptionist, was assigned to handle a guest complaint about room service. The mock guest acted very upset, and Linda had to put in her best effort to remain calm, listen attentively, and offer a reasonable solution. She successfully diffused the situation, leaving the guest feeling satisfied. Sarah felt proud as she witnessed her team's progress. She knew that this wasn't an easy journey. Many of the employees had to confront their own biases and learn to overcome them. She also understood that nobody was perfect, but what truly mattered was that everyone was striving to improve. A few weeks after the training programs concluded, the hotel began to regain its rhythm. The changes were not only felt by the staff but also noticed by the guests themselves. Positive reviews started to reappear on social media and travel platforms, with many customers highlighting the noticeable improvement in service quality and employee attitudes. Sarah, along with the management team, continued to monitor and gather feedback from guests. She also made frequent visits to the hotel to personally check on the quality of service. Each time, she could sense the warmth and professionalism that the staff exuded. The care, respect, and attentiveness were evident not just in their words but in their actions as well. Henry closely followed the progress as well. He observed the positive changes not only at the hotel where the incident had occurred but also across his entire chain of hotels. The lessons learned from the incident became valuable takeaways for the entire company. Henry felt relieved to see his team growing from their mistakes and was confident that they would continue to improve. The experience, while challenging, had ultimately strengthened the foundation of the company's values and operations. Henry realized that the recent incident had provided a deeper lesson than he could have anticipated, not just about managing a hotel but about human interactions. For him, the red MAGA hat wasn't merely a political symbol. It was a tool to test the professionalism of his staff. He never expected it to become the reason for being denied service at his own hotel. Determined to turn this experience into a learning opportunity, Henry decided to share his story with other leaders across the hotel chain. He organized a virtual meeting with all regional managers and department heads. During the meeting, he recounted the entire incident and his personal experience, emphasizing the importance of treating everyone fairly, regardless of any differences. "We are not just in the business of running hotels," Henry said, his voice steady but commanding. "We are in the business of hospitality, respect, and care for people. Our hotels are not just places to spend the night. They are places where people should feel welcomed, respected, and cared for." After the meeting, many managers emailed Henry to thank him for sharing his story. They felt that what he said resonated not only with their work but also with their personal lives. Treating others with fairness, kindness, and respect became a value they aimed to carry forward, both professionally and personally. After witnessing the progress and dedication of his staff, Henry decided to take time to meet and speak with them directly. He wanted to thank them for their continuous efforts and hear their thoughts on the recent changes. Henry sought to better understand the challenges they faced and how they overcame them. Sarah arranged a meeting in the hotel's conference room, where Henry could interact with groups of employees. As he entered the room, he was greeted with warm smiles and respectful glances. For many staff members, it was their first time meeting the owner of the hotel chain, and they felt both nervous and proud. Henry began the meeting with a smile and a friendly greeting. "Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to meet you all today. I know the past few weeks have not been easy, and I want to thank each of you for not only embracing change but also for working hard to overcome challenges and improve every day." Then, the receptionist who had served Henry during his recent visit spoke up. "Mr. Bennett, we're very grateful to you and Ms. Sarah for giving us the opportunity to learn and improve. At first, we felt a bit nervous and pressured, but we realized this process has helped us become more professional and more connected to our work." Linda, who had shared her story about overcoming biases during the training session, raised her hand and added, "I think these changes have not only improved our professional skills, but also made us better people in our everyday lives. I've learned not to judge others by appearances and to always try to help them with sincerity." Henry nodded, his tone warm. "I'm truly glad to hear your insights. I know that change is never easy, but what matters most is that we've faced it together and learned from our mistakes. To me, this doesn't just make our hotel better. It makes each of us better as individuals." Henry took time to speak privately with several employees, asking about their work and their lives. He wanted each person to feel heard and valued. When he spoke with Ben, Henry didn't hesitate to praise his professionalism and dedication to serving guests. Ben felt proud and reassured that he was on the right path. By the end of the meeting, Henry felt both satisfied and relieved. He knew that the recent incident had taught him and his staff invaluable lessons about respect and professionalism. He also felt proud of the people who had helped build his hotel chain and hoped that the values they had learned would continue to resonate, not just in their work but in their everyday lives. After months of implementing the training programs and fostering a cultural shift within the hotel, Sarah and Henry decided to meet and evaluate the results they had achieved. The meeting took place in Henry's elegant office, softly illuminated by crystal chandeliers, creating a warm and dignified atmosphere. Sarah brought detailed reports on service quality and customer feedback over the past months. She began her presentation by highlighting the positive changes they had received from guests. "Henry, the feedback from customers has been overwhelmingly positive," Sarah said, her joy evident in her tone. "Since we launched the training programs, we've received numerous glowing reviews. Guests have not only noted the professionalism of our staff, but also appreciated the warmth and friendliness they bring to their interactions." Henry listened attentively, a satisfied smile on his face. He glanced at the charts Sarah provided, showing significant improvements in customer satisfaction scores and overall ratings. "I'm truly delighted to hear this, Sarah. What we've done isn't just about boosting revenue. It's about delivering real value to everyone who walks through our doors." Sarah continued, "It's not just the guests who've benefited. Our staff feel more comfortable and connected to their roles. The training sessions have helped them better understand their responsibilities and the impact they have in creating a positive work environment." Henry nodded in agreement. "This is exactly what I've always envisioned. A place where guests feel genuinely welcomed and employees take pride in what they do. Achieving that requires unity and commitment from everyone." Sarah smiled, and the two continued to discuss the next steps needed to sustain and enhance the positive work culture they had cultivated. They both agreed that the training programs should become a permanent part of the hotel's operations. This would not only help maintain the professionalism of the staff, but also ensure they continued to grow and improve. By the end of their meeting, both Henry and Sarah felt confident that the changes they had implemented were laying the foundation for a thriving and harmonious hotel environment that would benefit both employees and guests for years to come. As the hotel continued to recover and thrive, Julia and Carl embarked on their own personal journeys after leaving their jobs. These journeys forced them to confront their past mistakes and learn how to overcome them. After being terminated, Julia felt lost and deeply saddened. She blamed herself for allowing personal biases to influence her actions and harm her career. However, after weeks of self-reflection, Julia decided she wouldn't let her mistakes define her life. She enrolled in customer service management courses, focusing on learning how to better control her emotions and overcome her biases. During these courses, Julia met others who were also striving to change and improve themselves. They shared stories of their own mistakes and the lessons they had learned. These stories inspired Julia, helping her realize that everyone makes mistakes. But what truly matters is how we learn and grow from them. Determined to restart her career, Julia began applying for customer service jobs. After persistent effort, she was hired at a smaller hotel. She applied everything she had learned, continually improving her communication skills and reminding herself to always approach others with respect and professionalism. Julia's commitment to change not only helped her rebuild her career, but also transformed her approach to interacting with people. For Carl, resigning from his position was a difficult decision. Having worked at Henry's hotel for many years, he had considered it a significant part of his identity. Losing the job left Carl feeling adrift, but he didn't let it discourage him for long. He decided to use the time to enhance his leadership skills and learn how to better manage a team. Carl enrolled in a leadership management course, where he learned the importance of listening to his employees, guiding them effectively, and fostering motivation. He came to understand that being a manager isn't just about overseeing tasks, but also about inspiring and supporting employees to reach their full potential. After completing the course, Carl secured a new job at another hotel. This time, he was determined not to repeat his past mistakes. He focused on creating a positive and open work environment where everyone felt heard and respected. Carl's renewed perspective and dedication not only made him a better leader, but also earned him the respect of his new team. Both Julia and Carl's journeys demonstrated that mistakes, while painful, can be powerful catalysts for growth. Their determination to learn and improve not only allowed them to rebuild their careers, but also helped them become more compassionate, professional, and thoughtful individuals. These transformations underscored the value of resilience, self-reflection, and the willingness to change. In the months that followed, the hotel gradually regained its standing. The cultural and service attitude changes had a clear impact. Both customers and staff noticed the difference in the working environment. Everyone felt prouder of the work they were doing and the hotel they were serving. Sarah continued to oversee and refine the training programs. She consistently sought feedback from employees and guests, using it to adjust and ensure that the hotel was always improving its service quality. Regular meetings with department heads became a staple, providing a space for sharing new ideas and learning from both successes and setbacks. Henry frequently visited the hotel unannounced, not to inspect, but to immerse himself in the atmosphere. He wanted to witness firsthand the changes that he and Sarah had worked so hard to implement. During each visit, he found the staff welcoming him with warm smiles, no longer showing the hesitation or apprehension he had encountered during his first visit. One evening, as Henry sat in the hotel's restaurant, he observed a server attentively taking care of a young family. The server listened carefully, paying attention to small details, such as bringing an extra chair for the baby and asking if they had any special requests. Henry smiled. This was exactly what he had envisioned, a place where everyone felt cared for and valued. On a beautiful day, Henry decided to hold a meeting with the entire hotel staff to express his gratitude for their unwavering efforts over the past months. The gathering took place in a large conference room at the hotel, where employees from all departments came together. Stepping onto the stage, Henry's eyes shone with pride as he looked at his team. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "Today, I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for what you've done for this hotel." He continued, "We've been through challenging times, but thanks to your commitment and relentless efforts, we've overcome those challenges and emerged stronger. You haven't just helped this hotel recover. You've created an environment that we can all be proud of." Standing at the back of the room, Sarah felt deeply moved by Henry's words. She knew that the changes they had implemented weren't just about policies but about people. Their team was more than just hotel employees, they were a family, learning and growing together. When Henry finished his speech, he invited everyone to stay for a meal and informal conversations. The atmosphere in the room became warm and lively. Laughter filled the air as people shared funny stories and reminisced about the moments they had experienced together. Henry stepped down from the stage and moved around the room, speaking with small groups of employees. He wanted everyone to feel genuinely valued and know that their contributions mattered. When he stopped to talk to Linda, the receptionist who had shared her story about changing her mindset, he commended her on her growth and courage in confronting her own biases. Smiling, Linda said, "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I think all of us have learned so much from what happened, and I feel proud to have been part of this transformation." Henry nodded, his eyes reflecting pride. "I'm proud of all of you too. This is only the beginning, and I believe we'll achieve even greater things together." The gathering ended with warmth and a sense of unity. Everyone felt that they were not just co-workers but companions on a shared journey of growth and progress. As Henry left the hotel, he felt a sense of peace and hope. He knew that what had transpired wasn't just a lesson in business but also a lesson in humanity, respect, and compassion. He was proud of his team and confident that his hotel would continue to thrive, becoming a place where everyone felt welcomed and valued. With every new milestone, Henry knew that he and his team would remain steadfast in their core values: respect, hospitality, and service excellence, to build not only a financially successful brand but also a symbol of kindness and professionalism.